decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Let's see if I remember how to do this. Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, to be more accurate, with Dave Minuk. With Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here for the next couple of hours talking about everything to do with the Winnipeg Jets as training camp is rapidly approaching the offseason. The quiet offseason is quickly coming to an end. Hockey season, folks, and you know this if you've been outside at all in the early morning hours with the chill in the air. Hockey season is right around the corner.
Summer's over, right, Drew?
Well, I'm not prepared to say summer's over because I still like, over. Those warm September days are very lovely. I'm not prepared to say it's completely done, but there's definitely a chill in the air, overnight and all, and that's okay too. But I'm fine with it being chilly, that chill in the air overnight, and it being summer until mid-November. I'm good with that.
You've got those brittle bones, right, Drew? I mean, nobody likes breakups, but I'm telling you, Drew, it's over. Don't call me.
Okay, don't worry. Not calling you won't be a problem at all. Dave M., good to see you, my friend. How are things?
Things are good. Feeling rested, feeling rejuvenated, feeling ready to go, ready to return. We've got the Illegal Curve Show. Got my license plate behind me, although I'm blocking it, so I might have to find a new
nobody
spot.
Can see the license plate. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Show the license plate, Dave M. Show you're still blocking it.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay, it's got to be bigger.
I know. I might have to move it over here. We'll move it over here. But I had a nice little Illegal Curve license plate, not street legal, as the Red Dragon, as Will Ferrell once said about the Red Dragon. But
you mean like mine?
Yeah. We got some. I got the fireball, lit up fireball behind me. So I got some new props for the background. But
and for those wondering, it's not too early. 9 o'clock in the morning is not too early for fireball. No. I'd say like 7 is a little bit early, but once it hits like 8 o'clock, Dave, we're good to go.
Yeah, especially on Banjo Bowl Saturday, there's no rules. You're allowed to drink whenever you want on Banjo Bowl Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. Those Rough Rider fans have been drinking since yesterday at 5 in the afternoon, right? So.
Exactly. There you go. Good to see you both, gentlemen. Dave has acquired some new things, which is nice. That's good that Dave M is going out and acquiring new items. You know who hasn't really gone out and acquired anything new? That's the Winnipeg Jets. That's Kevin Shoveldayoff. That's the True North organization. With all due respect, and my apologies, of course, to discounting the Sam Gagner signing, which we'll get into because it's a useful signing. There's some usefulness in Sam Gagner. The offseason of upheaval that everyone was expecting and that has been anticipated since the disaster of last year never came to fruition. They are running it back, more or less, barring something tremendously unforeseen in the next couple weeks. The Jets team that's so disappointed last year, minus Andrew Kopp, of course, who was traded at the deadline, minus Paul Stastny, who wasn't re-signed. For the most part, the core of it, the leadership group is coming back again. And, they say that, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. So let me ask you guys that question. Why should the Jets expect different results than the disappointment that we saw last season?
Yeah, it's the question that every Jets fan and, people across the hockey world are asking, Drew, because, you bring in David Riddick and, he replaces Eric Comrie and he's a solid backup. But I don't know if you could make the stretch and say that that's an upgrade over Eric Comrie. You could even say that it's a step back the way Riddick has played as of late. And we'll get into Sam Gagner, but Gagner is obviously going to be third, fourth line guy. He maybe gets you 20, 25 points, something like that. Right. But that's a depth move. We're not sure how close the Jets were to trading either Pierre-Luc Dubois or Blake Wheeler, but those were obviously, the two big ones, the two big players that we thought would move. But it's tough to say that the Jets got better, right? Like Andrew Kopp, as you mentioned, he's traded before the deadline. But if you just compare, the 21-22 opening night roster to the 22-23 opening roster as it stands now, I think it's hard to say that it's going to be better. Like Cole Perfetti, I think everyone is expecting big things out of him. Morgan Barron, who was acquired, of course, in the Kopp trade. I think a lot of people are expecting him, to either play on the third line or fourth line, and he's a solid player. But like and Paul Stastny, it's tough to say that, for example, Barron, Perfetti, and whoever, let's say David Gustafsson or Jansen Harkins is better than Andrew Kopp, Paul Stastny, whoever you want to pick that was on the Jets last year, right? So I would say that the Jets probably just on paper right now, guys, you would say took a step back. But really, like Scott Bielik of the Sun wrote about it, in the Winnipeg Sun today, like, you could say that, there's every reason to believe that you'll get better performances out of certain players, namely, Neil Pionk on defense. And I think he will have a better season. I think, you're expecting, a huge season out of Nick Ehlers. He missed 20 games, of course, last year. Like you're expecting better performances out of certain players. Connor Hellebuyck, obviously, is the big one. He wasn't bad last year, but he definitely wasn't, the top goalie in the league like we've been accustomed to, right? So there's every reason to believe the Jets can make the playoffs. Like I don't think the Dallas Stars, for example, are that much better than the Jets, even with the addition of Mason Marchment. But it's surprising, Drew, that we've been off air for 5 weeks and the only move the Jets have made, Sam Gagner. And again, we're not picking on Sam Gagner. We're just saying, as this team is currently constructed right now, I mean, they're a far, far way off from being anything close to a Stanley Cup contender.
Well, and you make that point there, Ezzy, and isn't that ultimately your goal every year? And truthfully, there's really not 32 Stanley Cup contenders, and there's more like 4 Stanley Cup contenders on any given season. And we saw what Colorado was, and we saw what Tampa was, and we saw that Stanley Cup final, and they were almost playing a different game than the Winnipeg Jets were, and a lot of the other teams in the NHL were for the majority of last season. They're playing at a speed and they're playing at a talent level that most teams can't match up to. So with that said, what are these Winnipeg Jets for this coming season, Dave M? I mean, that they want to make the playoffs, and they would say, or the sort of the cliche would be, well, if you make it into the playoffs, anything can happen. And yeah, I suppose that's correct, but that is not realistic. That to squeak in and then all of a sudden go on some sort of miraculous run. That's not something that typically happens. But for the fan base and for the people who want to believe, what is there to believe in, Dave?
So you want me to give everyone some faith and let everybody take a pause, a step back? I mean, look, look, the truth is, Drew, that I think this team probably will be served well by having no expectations on them and having everyone, remove the Stanley Cup contender banner and that sort of thing from their shoulders. I think the question becomes, can they actually play a defensive brand of hockey? And it's not just Mark Scheifele. There's other guys on this team who do not play sufficient defense to warrant that, that this team has a buy-in for that sort of way of playing. And again, you don't have to become the New Jersey Devils to suddenly create a contender, but I think you have to be able to offset some of your deficiencies. And it'll be interesting to see, right? I mean, the logjam at D is still there. All they did actually, instead of changing that, was add defensemen, and you could say minor league guys, but still they continued to add defensemen to the roster this summer, and they didn't remove anyone. So it appears that the idea of running it back is taking place clearly. And will you have that? I mean, it's interesting, right? Because people are upset that the Jets didn't make any moves, but the people every summer are upset that they block the path for young players to get that opportunity. And we saw with Eric Comrie. I mean, guys, we were here this time last summer having this exact same conversation, and everyone's like, Eric Comrie isn't an NHL backup. I said, well, this is different because he's going to have an opportunity. I mean, again, I was on board. I think we were on board saying that he's more than capable. He just needs that opportunity. So, if you saw the way Morgan Barron played in the playoffs for the Manitoba Moose, he was pretty good. I mean, is Morgan Barron going to come and become like this, top 6 winger that the Jets are going to have? And he's going to be, I don't know. I have no idea. It'll be interesting to see what he does with the opportunity. Jansen Harkins, another guy, right? When he gets that chance, sometimes he can show some flashes of things. So folks are always upset. They're lamenting. And Cole Perfetti, I mean, let's be realistic. If you get him healthy and you play him with complementary players, Cole Perfetti can be a very big impact player. I don't think it's like he was an impact player at the AHL level. He can make an impact at the, I mean, people go, oh, well, what does the AHL mean? Well, Jack Roslovic was one of the best players in the AHL, just before he got called up. Jack Roslovic had 22 goals for the Columbus Blue Jackets this year, and he's probably going to have 30 to 40 this year with the way that team is constructed. So guys can get an opportunity. It's amazing to me that people have this tunnel vision. They say, we have to bring in guys. First of all, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. Look, you saw it. You heard Weber was talking about guys that the Jets bid on that chose to go elsewhere. Guys can choose that. It's a free system in that regard. So what do you do? Do you rely on guys that you have in your system? A David Gustafson, who, David Gustafson unfortunately had bad luck, right? He had the two games with the Jets and had two separate injuries. But in the AHL, he didn't have any injuries. So it's unfortunate luck. I mean, we'll see how he comes back this year. It could be different. He could be a difference, right? In terms of playing at, like I said, he might not play the center role, but you could very easily see David Gustafson playing with, on the wing with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton, and giving you some sort of interesting super defensively responsible third line for the Winnipeg Jets, a line that would be able to hold its own and maybe score occasionally. So I just think that I'm not going to tear my hair out and say, oh, well, they didn't do anything. This is crazy. I just think like now you're giving an opportunity for younger players to seize roles. And I think that's all everybody seems to want every year until they actually potentially could do that. And now everybody's going crazy that it's actually happening. So it's like, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. And just before we go back to you here, Drew, I just wanted to, throw in Dave mentioned Perfetti, and that's the big one. I think most Jets fans, people watching, listening, I think most people think, there's a good chance Cole Perfetti will play on the wing in the Jets top six. Like everybody knows the top six is pretty solidified. It's the bottom six. And, it's a long time since, we had the TLC line of Brandon Tanev, Andrew Kopp, and Adam Lowry, right? Like you knew that was going to be your third line, for at least a couple of years, right? Like it's completely wide open. I think we'd all agree, Adam Lowry will slot in as the third line center, even though, many of us, think that maybe he'd be better suited to be a fourth line center. Not a knock on Lowry, just, he doesn't have a high offensive upside at this point in his career. But when you're talking about Morgan Barron or Mason Appleton, you would throw in, Jansen Harkins, who I think I mentioned earlier, David Gustafson. Like you could basically, Dave, like these guys are interchangeable on the third and fourth lines, right? Like you throw in Dominic Toninato in there. Saku Manalainen is a guy that, I think, he'll want to crack the Jets top 13. I don't think he would come back to Canada, as Drew mentioned at the time. Like you'd think that he wants to get his NHL career going, even though, he might end up playing a little bit in the AHL. I'm not sure what his contract status is in terms of, sending him down, from the Moose back up to the Jets. But the point is, when it comes to the forwards, there's going to be a lot of internal competition there, right? For guys trying to crack the roster. I just don't think it's very deep. The biggest concern is what, Dave said earlier. I'm pretty surprised that the defense is literally exactly the same as it was last year. Like I've said this before, I think Dave agrees. He talked to Dylan Sandberg, a few weeks back. Like his 15 games last year to me prove that he's NHL ready and he should be in the Jets top six. So what are you doing with Logan Stanley? What are you doing, with Ville Heinola? You can't have, in my opinion, Ville Heinola or Brendan Dillon as your seventh defenseman. So, I mean, we'll see if the Jets make a move, but right now that left side, it's kind of hard to figure out. Like opening night roster, I think we know, Josh Morrissey's going to be in there, but in terms of the other two left side defensemen, it's kind of, pick who you think is going to make it. Like in terms of, Dylan Sandberg and Brendan Dillon, those are probably, the favorites to be your second and third pairing defenseman. But then what are you doing with Ville Heinola? Because he's got to play next year. He can't be, in your press box, half the time or more than that. So that's probably the biggest surprise to me, that no moves were made on the back end.
Saturday morning, the return of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. The opening segment is brought to you by Betway, one of the most trusted voices in sports betting, both in Canada and all around the world. Proud sponsor of this program as well. Betway is the sports betting app that puts you, the customer, at the forefront with a large selection of betting options in sports, as well as strong promotions and fair odds. What are you waiting for? Head on over to Betway and bet your way. Must be 19 years or older to play. Please play responsibly. Yes, Dave M, you're giving me the finger. Not that finger. That might be that might be a couple. That might take a couple shows before you give me that finger.
We're not there yet, but no, I was just gonna say, just as he's point, Sacramento line is waiver exempt, so he can go down back and forth, up and down to the Jets and the Moose without having clear waivers.
A wild card to watch in training camp because, admittedly, I don't think anybody really knows much about him. I don't know that anyone was thinking he's a guy who's going to come over and join the Jets organization. And we're actively scouting what was going on in the Finnish Elite League or in last season to keep an eye on him. So he's another one of those guys who's a wild card. But you both mentioned Cole Perfetti, and I know that he was effective at the AHL level. No question about that. He was an impact player there, Dave. Yeah. But, it just seems like, with the way the Jets forward group is currently aligned, if Perfetti, isn't ready to step in and make an impact, if he's not ready to play a top 6 role.
Do you mean, hold on, just to confirm, are you saying from a health perspective, or are you saying from
just, an adjustment to the NHL level perspective?
He is healthy. The Jets have mentioned that he's healthy. He's ready to go for training camp.
Right. Yeah. But, there's no security blanket for him. There's no easing him in to the Jets top 6.
That was Paul Stastny.
Or that was Andrew Kopp as well. I mean,
right. That's why you can't say, like, that's what I was saying earlier, guys, like, all due respect to, Morgan Barron and Sam Gagner, like, those guys are not Andrew Kopp and Paul Stastny, right? Like, they're just not only are they, like, Sam Gagner can play on the penalty kill. We should mention that. Like, he's a guy that I imagine will get some penalty kill time. I'm not sure if he gets top power play time. Top penalty kill time. I mean, we know Adam Lowry factors in, Kyle Connor factors in, right? There's other players,
but he's not a top 6 guy at this stage of his career.
I mean, can he play on your second line? Of course he can, but like, Gagner is not a guy that you're going to get a lot of offense if you put him in the top 6, regardless if he plays with, Dubois or Scheifele. This is a depth forward. Like, there's no really arguing that. Nobody's going to argue that, Sam Gagner is going to put up 60 points this year, right? So you're right. There isn't a security blanket. And even though Perfetti, I think we all think the sky's the limit. Like, this guy, he could put in 80 points, 90 points. Like, he's that good one day, but he's only 21 years old and he's only got, a limited amount of NHL experience. I forget exactly what it is, 20 games, 30 games, right? I think Perfetti absolutely can, flourish on the second line, but you're right. I mean, you're depending a lot on young players like Morgan Barron, you forget, is only 23 years old, right? And I agree with Dave. I think I'm a big fan of Barron's game. Like, I like his size. I just like his overall attitude, and he's got a scoring touch. But, does he start off on the third line or the fourth line? That's why I was saying earlier, right now, there's so many question marks. I mean, training camp and the preseason are going to determine, right? Like, who wins these types of battles. Like, a guy like Jansen Harkins, you don't think he wants to be on the third line or at the very least have more of a increased role on this team. So right now, the forward group, is definitely more of a question mark than the back end.
I just want to add in, like, I was going to say, like, I just wanted to add in, I think it's just funny though, because folks think about how every year people complain the fact that the Jets come in and bring a guy like a Nate Thompson, which blocks the path for a David Gustafsson. Well, there's no blocking the path for David Gustafsson this year. David Gustafsson, obviously not waiver exempt, so he's not going to be going down anytime soon to the Moose. So you got a guy like David Gustafsson. He's going to obviously has to earn it. He has to have had a great summer and be ready to go for training camp. But there's opportunity, and I think that's the key word. And I'm not pie in the sky being like, okay, suddenly this Jets team is. I'm not suggesting they're a Stanley Cup contender. What I am suggesting though is that I think you've got a lot of people say, oh, these guys are playing on the Moose. They're not any good. Like, sorry guys, Dylan Sandberg, hell of a good player, right? Billy Heinola, hell of a good player. Guys get blocked. I mean, that's just something that can happen, in terms of your path to the NHL. So these young guys are gonna have an opportunity in
maybe Brixton's gonna end up playing on the fourth line.
It's got to be a special occasion here on the show when Brixton comes down to somehow visit us. That doesn't normally happen where she joins the program, but she snuck into the studio room to see what Dad was doing. So say good morning to Brixton there, everybody. Brixton is 14.
Oh, Brixton. Anyways,
almost as old as you, Drew.
Well, Brixton could be a wily vet that the Jets maybe will bring in, but
she's great for locker room morale also.
Yeah, exactly. I just think that I'm not suggesting that somehow the Moose are going to show up and save the day. I'm not making that assertion. But what I am saying is that you had guys, and I know there's people who watch the Moose, but you watch what a guy can do in the playoffs, and it's important. Playoffs are a different animal. I talked to like I said, I sat and had a half an hour chat with Morgan Barron. Was it last week? And you can see what these guys learn from playoff hockey. Johnny Kovacevic, another guy. Now he's a right side guy, so he doesn't have quite the glut in front of him that the other guys do. But Kovacevic is a guy who, isn't waiver exempt. So he's, signed that 3-year deal with the Jets. He's looking, he's most likely right now your 7-8 guy. And it looks like from a waiver perspective, well, Sandberg and Heinola are both waiver exempt. So the Jets could, in theory, send them both down to avoid having to do something with Logan Stanley, whatever. But it's just going to be an interesting situation because, like I said, I think that we always talk about it year after year. Gagne, great. 31 points last year with Detroit. Probably had more opportunity playing up in the lineup in Detroit. But the reality is, as he went through it, great depth piece. That's a kind of role player that you're going to want to have, that veteran presence on a team like this. That's not a bad thing, especially if you are going to trust some of these younger players to come in and try and seize a bigger opportunity. But how is Jansen Harkins that young a player? I just think also it's all about distribution, right? We're seeing what are the minutes going to look like? Does Blake Wheeler need to be playing 23 minutes a game? I don't think so.
Nope.
I think Blake Wheeler is going to be served best by having a more reduced ice time and getting the best. It's kind of like the old Paul Maurice theory about, hold on 1 second. It's like the Paul Maurice theory about Nikolai Ehlers, right? Paul Maurice used to say, well, Nikolai Ehlers is playing the right amount of time for Nikolai Ehlers. And if he was getting more time, who knows if he'd be having that a good a game? Well, maybe we'll see the same with the reverse with Blake Wheeler.
I absolutely agree that Blake Wheeler shouldn't at this point in his career be playing, 23 minutes a game. It's just too much ice time. But you look at the Jets forward group, and I don't know, who can take over that additional ice time from him. It's not this. There's not a lot of depth in that forward group, so that a guy who's in your top 6, as Blake Wheeler most assuredly is, given the way the roster is constructed this season. If you're trying to reduce his minutes, I'm not sure who's necessarily being able to step up to take on those minutes, because guys like Perfetti, guys like Ehlers, they're going to get loads of minutes because they're in the top 6. They're the way it's currently drawn up on the depth chart, on anyone's depth chart, those guys are key performers. There's not that third line guy or that clear third line player who can step up and play bigger minutes in your top 6 like there had been last season with guys like Stasny and Kopp, like we've talked about. This is a thin forward group. It is. It's a young forward group, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But there's not somebody that's necessarily, been in that third line role who's smashing at a glass ceiling to get up there.
No, and that's why the Jets, as they're currently constructed, I don't think anybody's expecting, any type of major moves. This is the group. The Jets are going to score goals, like you mentioned. Ehlers, Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler, Perfetti. Like the Jets will score goals, and most likely from their top 6. But it's really the bottom 6. I know, the bottom 6 is a little bit antiquated, or some people, think it is. Third and fourth lines, let's say that. The lower lines, there's not a ton of offense. Bringing in Sam Gagner helps. Morgan Barron, I think, is going to have a decent season, but it's unrealistic to expect Morgan Barron to have 50 points this year. I just think it is. Like, he's only played 30 NHL games. I'm not saying that he can't get to 50 points. I just think to pencil him in, I'm using 50 because, that's kind of like an Andrew Kopp type of, point production number, right? I think he had a little bit more than that last year, but you guys know what I'm saying. 45, 50 points. It's just right now, as I said, as Dave mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of guys. It depends on, and one thing we haven't talked about a lot, I know we're going to, go to break because we got Rennie coming up here, but you got a new coach and new coaching staff, with Rick Bowness and Brad Lauer, Marty Johnston. How do they see this team? How are they going to deploy these types of players? That is something to consider. It's not Paul Maurice. You can't necessarily, depend on what he used to do. It is a new regime here. So, we'll see what happens, but I think that's going to also be, something else. Like, all of these guys have to prove themselves to Bowness, right?
They absolutely do. When we come back, you mentioned it, Sean Reynolds is going to join us Saturday morning. We're live. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rollies and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It just got about 75% more handsome, I'd say, in this studio on this Saturday morning. Our good friend from Sportsnet, you know him as Rennie, Sean Reynolds, joins us. Sean, welcome back to the program. Good to see you. How's the summer been? Have you been invited out at all to join the Manitoba Golf Tour? What happens in the summer when Kenny tries to become a professional golfer? Is there a split between Kenny and Rennie at that point in time? Do you go your separate ways, or take us behind the scenes of the machinations of Kenny and Rennie come summertime?
Well, I'll tell you, if someone is trying to become a professional golfer, that means they're pretty good, and that drives a wedge between they and I right off the bat, because I am a terrible, terrible golfer. Ken and I will get out once or twice. I think we got out about 3 times this year, and for me, that's like a third or a quarter of my golf season, right? Like if I get 12 games in, it's been a good summer, So I golf with him about a quarter of the time, but since he golfs every day, and I don't know how often it is. I know that last year he had a real slow start to the golf season, and then at some point he'd strung together like 36 straight days of playing golf. So he gets it done, right? So I'm a very tiny part of his golf world. He's a big part of mine. But yeah, you get out there and he makes those shots that he makes, and it's just frustrating. So I'm probably better off not playing with him as much anyway.
I totally understand that sentiment. You, me, Ezzy, Dave, we're more the beer drinking golfers. He might be more the serious style.
That's I can succeed at that. The golf part, the good scorers, I can't. So I'm with you guys.
I hear you loud and clear. Thanks for joining us on this morning. Obviously, back into the swing of things. Training camp right around the corner for the Winnipeg Jets. We'll all be huddled together in a cold arena in no time flat.
Sounds like heaven.
It does a little bit, doesn't it? You know,
Yeah.
you know, you look at this offseason, and it's been, you know, everyone had expectations of such upheaval given the way last year happened, given the way last year ended. Appears as though they're going to be running it back for the most part, you know, similar, you know, so, you know, what do you think about that approach? I mean, our buddy Scott Billick wrote about it today in the Winnipeg Sun, saying, you know, maybe, you know, given how disappointing it was, you know, you make a couple small tweaks and see if there's still something there, you know, hopefully no pandemic, you know, hopefully none of the brouhaha with the coaching change of Paul Maurice mid-season. What do you think of that approach? Are the Jets and Jets management sort of fooling themselves in trying to run this back again? Or do you think it's worthwhile that they go give it another kick at the can?
Well, what I think is the strategy is not by design. I think the Jets explored change, and I think they explored big change. And what I think is they didn't like what they were going to get back, and it came down to that. And I do say this. I always go back to this. I remember I was on Nick Kiprios' show on Fan 590. It was either March or April, and the question he posed to me was, when they blow this team up, what's it going to look like? Who's going to go out of town? And I remember at that time I said, I'll tell you right now, I see this team being not much different next year than it is right now. And he was blown away by that. And I think people outside the market are blown away by that to a degree. I think for the first time ever, people inside the market are a little blown away by it, especially because it seemed, you know, that with the conversations that were happening in the dressing room, that there was so much need for change. But I think the big divide here is, if you are going to try and create massive change, you're either going to have to do what Brad Treliving did and take really big swings and take risks. And the risk there was that he traded for Huberdeau. And if Huberdeau didn't sign and lock down long-term, then that was going to look like a really bad deal. But he took that risk. He pulled the risk off. It worked. And then they went out and they got Nazem Kadri. It can look like that. You had to spend a lot of money. In the case of both Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau, they signed contracts that probably at the end of those contracts are going to be the kind of contracts that you know, some fans aren't that happy with, right? That's one way of doing it. The other thing is tearing it all down. And I think they explored trading Mark Scheifele. I think what they were trying to do is trade Mark Scheifele and turn it into Mark Scheifele, right? Get another player back who's as good as Mark Scheifele. And, you know, they wanted a 1-for-1. And I don't think that happens very often. It's too hard to make work with money. But two, why am I going to take on Mark Scheifele, who the Jets perceived, you know, the way that he played defensively last year as a little bit of an issue, and give a really good guy back in return? And then I have to try and resurrect the issues that you were dealing with that you didn't want to deal with anymore. So the only way I think those things were going to work is if the Jets tore down and rebuilt. And I don't think they're there yet. I think that I think that, you know, for Mark Chipman, for Kevin Cheveldayoff, there had been a lot of belief in this group and this core for a long time. They've said it. They've believed it. I truly think they believe it. I think to this day, they still believe it. They want it to work with this group, not only because everyone wants to succeed, but I think they want to be justified in the work, and their belief for all this time was actually there. So they're coming back. They're telling us this is the same team that last year everyone thought was going to go and do really big things. We can turn this around. The players have to say that, right? Because there's no other way. You got to believe in what you have. So I talked to Josh Morrissey just a couple of days ago. He's saying the same thing. This is the same team that everyone thought would do damage last year. We still believe you can do it. As a player, you have to think that way, and you have to say that. But to your point, Drew, management saying that while at the same time having explored change and not being able to pull it off. So it's a little bit different in those two cases. I think management is tying a little bit of a pretty bow on this. The players are just doing what they have to do as players.
Sean, you just mentioned Josh Morrissey, and you can just pencil him in as your number one defenseman on the left side. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that. We were talking about this during the first half an hour. Like I thought that it was almost a foregone conclusion that, you know, Kevin Cheveldayoff was going to move one of those left shot defensemen. Yeah. I mean, we know, you know, who those candidates were, right? Brendan Dillon, Logan Stanley. I was leaning towards Logan Stanley, not because I don't think he's, you know, a good character, good person, and a talented defenseman, just because, you know, Dylan Samberg to me is a guy that, you know, has to be in your top six. Like you can't have Dylan Samberg as your seventh or eighth defenseman. You can't have Samberg play in the AHL. Like he's done that. He's been a good soldier. Like those 15 games, I think, showed us a lot. Ville Heinola, I think a lot of people want to see him in the NHL this year. Like we're 12 days away from training camp. Do you see Chevy, moving a defenseman on the left side? Like how do you manage that situation, Sean? Because I mean, we can all see this. It goes back to, I know you and Kenny talked about this a lot, on your long form show, and you talked about it on the post game show. Like there is just too many left side defensemen and not enough starting spots.
Yeah, I mean, I still think, Kevin, we've talked about this. We know that the way that the Winnipeg Jets acquire players, it's not through traditional free agency. That doesn't happen that often. But what Kevin Cheveldayoff has done really well in the past is he's weaponized cap space. That's how he brought in Schmidt. That's how he brought in Dillon. It's how he brought in Stastny. It's the way he does his business. As he opens up cap space, he goes to find teams that are up against the cap crunch, and then he targets someone on that, and he says, "I'll give you salary relief." Right? Well, I think they're poised to do that again. The way that Kevin Cheveldayoff has carried his business, signing wise down the stretch here, leaves the opportunity for that. I wonder if this year. Part of that would be trying to take a bigger swing and move a bigger package so that you move maybe a Brendan Dillon out, and then you get, maybe another forward back and a bigger kind of player that fits the kind of $5 million-ish, $4 million-ish or whatever style of player that fits the cap space that they have right now. They don't need to make that move right off the bat. They could do it closer to the trade deadline, but I still think they want to solve that problem going ahead, because you guys are right. Like there's a logjam on defense there, and they got to take care of that. And it's going to drive Jets fans nuts if they go into another season and Ville Heinola is parked in the background and Dylan Samberg can't seem to get in there. The fans are going to go crazy because these guys are ready to move up. And you can say what you want. You can talk all you want about leaving guys in and seasoning them in the AHL and all that kind of stuff. But there's a difference between leaving guys there for what you think is like time to season and get better, and not being able to get a guy a spot that he deserves because you can't make the moves as a general manager to open up those spots. I think we are squarely in that stage right now. Something needs to be done. I still expect moves. I have for a while, but to your point, with camp right around the corner, the time to make moves is I mean, I'm not saying it's past, because I still think there's a lot of teams that are going to have to deal with some last minute cap issues. And that's where the Jets are positioned really well. But boy, oh boy, if I'm Ville Heinola or any of those defensemen, I'm looking at this and thinking, is this another year of waiting in line? Because as of today, that's what it looks like.
Saturday morning, you're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're back from our summer hiatus and joined by none other than Sean Reynolds of Sportsnet. Be sure to smash the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already done so.
And Sean, it's easy to forget Declan Chisholm, who, of course, is another left shot guy who was, in my opinion, the best defenseman that the Moose had in the entire playoff round against the Milwaukee Admirals. So it's interesting with Samberg, Heinola, Kovacevic, a lot of people focused on those guys. Chisholm actually was the best defenseman, and it was, I'm not going to say it wasn't close, but he was clearly the best guy. So there's another guy, the 2018 fifth rounder, people tend to forget, but he's another guy who will be
Dave's just making sure that everybody knows that Declan Chisholm is Dave's guy. That's what he's basically saying there, Rennie.
I'm just suggesting that he's someone that people should be paying attention to, because his skating is pretty much amongst the best, I would say, of the D prospects. It's got some things to work on. Anyways, that's not my question, though, Sean. My question to you is about a word you just used in your response to Ezzy, and it was about opportunity. It's something I talked about earlier, and we talked, how Jets fans are upset that the Jets aren't bringing in more players. And I understand that you want to bring in a lot of guys and then have people battle out, but don't you see this as an opportunity? A guy like Morgan Barron, a guy like David Gustafson, they get that opportunity. Same, I made this point earlier, as Eric Comrie, who everybody poo-pooed and said he couldn't do it. He couldn't handle the opportunity. And what did Eric Comrie do? He showed that he was able to elevate himself. And I just think that these guys, again, I'm not suggesting that the Jets are suddenly going to become a powerhouse, but I think that folks kind of lose sight of the fact that if you give these kids an opportunity, and they don't have a choice really based on the way the roster is configured, someone may step up and surprise or two and be able to be that difference maker that the Jets need.
Yeah, it's just a split strategy for me, Dave, because I agree, like you want to see what these guys do. We've all been talking about the Gus bus for how long and wanting to see how that worked. But I have a hard time thinking that this roster coming into this year without Paul Stastny, without Andrew Kopp, is a better group coming into this year than it was last year. I feel like as a group, they've taken a step back, and that's okay. That's fine. Like sometimes you need to take a step back to make sure guys get in, but it's like the whole idea of the Jets running it back, as Drew said, and keeping, like Blake Wheeler's 36 this year. He's still one of your main guys. Like your group is kind of ready up front. And what we see from a team like the Colorado Avalanche is they built and built and built over the years with their guys, and they all kind of came up together so that you're in the same window. And then they kind of arrived at the same time. That's what you're trying to do here. It's one of these scenarios where it's like, unless those guys, if the Jets really think that they can contend for a Stanley Cup, then they should be bringing in David Gustafsson or Morgan Barron or any of those players because they think they are an upgrade or over what they had before. I think it's, to your point, this is all about opportunity, but opportunity to develop and bring guys along kind of doesn't fit with the philosophy of what they chose over the offseason. And again, we talked about this off the bat. I think it was a forced choice. I think the Jets didn't like the other direction they were going in. But I just think it's a split strategy. You know what I mean? Like last year, the Jets were saying, we've arrived. We had these holes on the back end. We're all set up front. We're going to add these 2 veteran defensemen. They're going to go in this spot right there. Comrie is a fairly low risk, giving him an opportunity because Connor Hellebuyck is going to chew up 7/8 of the games anyways, right? So there you can see last year the strategy, there was no risks. This was we're ready to compete. We're ready to arrive. This year, all those holes are being filled in a different way, and they're being filled in a different way because I don't think that there's a lot of opportunity. So it's funny because I love the idea of giving Morgan Barron a chance. I love the idea of finally seeing what David Gustafsson can do. I just think that the strategy at this stage doesn't jive with what they're saying. If the Jets really believe that last year was a one-off and everyone out there has it wrong, we have a similar roster to what we had last year, and we're going to go compete for a Stanley Cup. The moves that they're making on the bottom of their lineup, I don't think say that. And no knock against those players. But the other part about this, guys, is like I think the Jets have always offensively been too top heavy, and they haven't built the kind of third and fourth lines that we see from other highly competitive teams. And that's a lot to ask from David Gustafsson and Morgan Barron and maybe Cole Perfetti to come in and be like, we need you to solve this problem we've never been able to solve before this. And we need you to do it while you're learning the pro game and on the run, because we're telling everyone we're competing for a Stanley Cup and you're going to have to arrive and help us make that happen. That's a lot to ask from young guys coming in.
Paul Maurice, Sean, obviously his tenure ended with, let's say, a cloud of uncertainty. Abruptly, it ended. Yeah. Dave Lowry came in, and he clearly just wasn't the answer. His voice wasn't resonating in the dressing room. Why is Rick Bowness's voice, why is his impact going to be more significant than that of, Paul Maurice at the beginning of last year, let's say?
Because I think that the Jets have had an accountability issue. I think you can see in a way that, how many times on our shows did we talk about like situations where, certain players, certain star players maybe should have got less ice time, maybe should have been benched the way that we were playing. That just did not happen under Paul Maurice. And I think that there was a little bit of an accountability issue in the dressing room with this team. Well, that's Rick Bowness's bread and butter. And we had him after he signed. We were lucky enough to get him on Kenny and Rennie. I just love the way he talked. He says, I hate gray areas. Everything that I do is black and white. This is what I need you to do. This is what's going to happen if you don't do it. Right? It's very laid out. And so I'm very interested to see what a Winnipeg Jets team with that kind of philosophy is going to look like. If I'm a Jets fan, my biggest reason for optimism this season is Rick Bowness and what I think he can bring to the team. I've covered him for quite a long time. Guys, when I was down in the 2015 Stanley Cup final when he was an assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Chicago Blackhawks, he became a big story just because behind the scenes, the players resonate with him so much. His name gets brought up so much that he ended up being a guy that came to the podium and was like a big storyline in that Stanley Cup final, because he's a really, really important guy behind the scenes. It wasn't a surprise to me when he took over the bench from Jim Montgomery that the Dallas Stars did really well, because he's one of those guys that he works as an assistant coach because he doesn't have the ego and to try and push out the head coach, and he respects them, so he respects his role. But at the same time, he's more than capable of being that head guy. And so I think that the Jets, I truly do think that a couple things. One, that he's going to get the most accountability out of these players, but two, he does a good job of creating a team. And I've said this time and time again, if you look last year and the year before, how many years have we seen the Jets have, like Kyle Connor had his best year ever last year. Pierre-Luc Dubois came back to being what we thought he could be. Josh Morrissey had just one heck of a year. You go up and down the roster, and last year, a lot of players had phenomenal years individually, but the Jets have had made a habit out of having phenomenal individual years by individuals on the team and not putting it together for team success. And I think that Dave Bowness is a guy who can do that. I'm interested to see. I don't buy management's line that we just like what we had and we're going to run it back as we still think it's there. Again, the players have to say it because they have to say it. I don't buy that the management group didn't try to make changes and didn't try to change things around. But at the same time, I do buy the line that it's interesting to see what this roster will do with Rick Bowness guiding it.
Yeah, and sticking with Bowness, Sean, and it leads nicely into my question, because Mike McIntyre has a column in today's Free Press about Mark Scheifele and how he's got something to prove and he wants to silence the critics. Like, is he the one player that you think Rick Bowness, I mean, a lot of Jets fans are hoping that Bowness is going to have that positive impact and help Scheifele's defensive game, but is he the one guy that you think can have the most impact on a player, being Scheifele? Like, is there another player? Are there a few players? Like, is it the veteran players? Is it the younger players? A lot of people, talk about in Dallas the impact, that he had on Jason Robertson or Rupe Hintz. You got to give credit to Stonewall's Derek Laxdal as well, who's an assistant coach with Bowness as well. But are those the types of players? Like, again, it's tough to answer because training camp hasn't even started. But I think Scheifele, is the obvious one, and certain skilled players on the Jets. I mean, they're not perfect. You can always improve the game of players like Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers. But is it Scheifele and Wheeler you're looking at? Like, what type of impact do you think he can have on those individual players, even though it's the team success that as you mentioned, that's the most important?
Well, I kind of think it's everyone because, but I don't want to cop out with that. Scheifele, massively, yes. You're entirely right. This is a guy who can put up a point per game sleeping on the ice. I mean, he's going to get his points. If you can add a more well-rounded defensive game to Mark Scheifele with that big body and that, like that kind of hockey nerd focus in and be a dog on a bone with something like that. If you make the bone that Mark Scheifele can't let go and keeps needing to chew on, if you can make that his defensive game and kind of turning him into an all-around center, it's scary to think what he could be. And I take a look at, what Joe Pavelski continued to do, an older player who is the captain of that team, highly defensively responsible, but still put up phenomenal numbers. I'm interested to see what Blake Wheeler's game looks like underneath Bowness, because Blake Wheeler's still showing signs of being a very good offensive player. A lot of that comes on the power play. But I'm interested to see the philosophies that Rick Bowness brings, because he's done this before. He's been around so long. He can go to an older player and say, I've coached older players in your situation. These are some of the things that they did to have the greatest success that they could have. And then you talk about a guy like Jason Robertson. And I think we talk about, how defensive that Stars team was. And I talked to Josh Morrissey the other day, and I talked to him a little bit about Bowness, and he talked about what it was like to play those Dallas teams under Bowness and how hard they were to play against. Well, like, Rick Bowness found a way to take a young guy like Jason Robertson and make him still defensively sound. Rope Hintz, who, probably came in a little baked in defensively well, but he still was able to give those guys the free rein to put up points and yet be defensively responsible and hard to play against. And the Jets can put up points. They just haven't been that hard to play against defensively. But it would be interesting to see if you could turn, Kyle Connor and Nick Ehlers and all these guys into players that still have the defensive gift and yet can be defensively responsible. Like, I just take a lot across the board and think this is a guy who could take all of these players. Usually we take a look at certain players and say, this guy's gifted defensively. This guy is good defensively, not so good offensively. But what I take a look at when I see that Stars team is I see all the guys have a really, really good mix. And I don't think that's a fluke. I think that's Rick Bowness at work in that situation. If you took and applied that to the Jets, you're talking about a potential career changing move for every guy on that roster. And so I'm excited to see what Kyle Connor's game looks like if he's still able to score the way he is, and I think he will be able to, but added a little bit more defensive responsibility, a little more structure. Guys, one of the reasons I think the Jets have produced so well offensively so long on an individual basis is they've been given the free rein to just kind of do that. So that's been job number one, but the team play, I don't think has been. So I think that we've seen those guys working with the freedom to you see this all the time, and especially on teams that, maybe 10 years ago or something like that aren't as good. You'll get guys who put up audacious amount of points, and then you watch them play, and it's like, well, of course, they're cherry picking the whole time. I went and saw a game when the Islanders had the fisherman jerseys, and Ziggy Palffy in the old Winnipeg Arena. Ziggy Palffy was on that team, and Ziggy Palffy literally hung around the red line and cherry picked for passes to go in and score, right? I couldn't believe it was happening at the NHL level, but he was doing it. And they were a terrible team, and I think he probably put up 3 points that game, but he wasn't helping them win anything, right? Well, I'm not saying the Jets are that bad, but I think there's been an element of offense first. Let's get our points. Let's do that. And with, trying to tell themselves that they were getting the job done defensively, I think we're going to see them getting the job done defensively under this system. We'll see how much points they have to sacrifice, or if Rick Bowness can do what he's done with Jason Robertson and allow them to keep those points and just add in the defensive ability into their game.
Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet is our guest. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
So, Sean, is there any player that has more pressure on him, in theory, because he hasn't produced at the NHL level, than Cole Perfetti? Because it seems like all eyes are on him. He's, listed, I was reading an article yesterday, top 5, most likely to win a Calder this year. I mean, we've seen it. Like I use the example. Jack Roslovic at the AHL level was dominant, came up, didn't necessarily make that impact right away. Eventually, now we're seeing it. 22 goals in Columbus this past season. Is Cole Perfetti the one player that could be a difference maker that the Jets really didn't have to be a difference maker last year?
I think it depends how you use him, right? Like when you put Cole Perfetti where he was last year, Cole Perfetti was in a good spot to produce. It's funny. Like all fans, Jets fans got really excited about a prospect coming up, and I kept seeing all of these people talk about Cole Perfetti and how, oh my God, did you see him out there? And he was so amazing, and this guy's the next big thing, and look out, the best line in hockey for years to come. And this is no knock against Cole Perfetti. I saw Cole Perfetti being a young guy with obvious skill, trying to make his way at the next level. I didn't see a kid who took the NHL by storm and grabbed, opposition teams by the throat and threw them around. Like he, to be honest, I take a look at his numbers. He didn't provide that much offense considering the line, the players that he was playing with. That's not a knock against him. That's a young guy starting to make his way into the league. There's so much offense on this Jets team that quite often, individually, that's not what they need. So I don't see him as being needed to produce at that level. I'm interested again with Rick Bowness to see him do what we never saw happen or didn't see happen often with Paul Maurice. I always said this. Paul Maurice's lines looked like he said, who's the best player on our team? He's on line 1. Who's the second best? He's on the wing. Who's the third best? He's on the wing. Now let's go to the next line. Who's the fourth best? Put him on that line. The top 6 players were all like that. And I think you guys, we've had conversations about this before. I think there's different philosophies around the league where guys will take, 2 good players and put them with, an Evgeny Svechnikov, you know what I mean? And see it, hey, look at that, it worked. And then they ripped that and took it away. When you get really good players like Sidney Crosby, you can take and put 2 college players on his line, 2 guys who are playing college, and he can go out and win a Stanley Cup that year with those. You take really good players and you create balance, and you take guys who aren't as good or aren't there yet or whatever, and you mix them with that. And so I think if Rick Bowness approaches that a little bit differently and tries to create like a top 9 scoring kind of situation, then I think that's where Cole Perfetti gets interesting, because if he can be like Cole Perfetti was in that spot, but Dubois and Kyle Connor were going to get their points regardless of whether Cole Perfetti was there or not. So to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that he was necessary or that he's impactful. Not because he couldn't be an impactful player, but because the situation doesn't provide him the opportunity to be impactful. But if you take and you mix things around a lot and you find like a really good pairing where, let's say they did something crazy, and I'm not advocating for this, I'm just throwing something out there. Like David Gustafson has Kyle Connor on his wing and Cole Perfetti gets thrown in there or something like that, and they find out that Kyle Connor still keeps doing what he's doing, well, now you've got other ways to go. That's how he could be impactful. So this to me is the biggest question mark going into this for guys like us that cover the team. You knew what Paul Maurice was going to do. Every year you knew what he was going to do. You knew how the lines were going to shake down. He wouldn't start the year with Connor, Scheifele and Wheeler, but you knew he was going to go there, guys. You knew he had to go back to that well over and over again, right? So you knew that was going to happen. We're in uncharted territory. I'm interested in seeing how Rick Bowness is going to balance that maybe more than anything. Of all the things I'm curious to see what happens is how he runs his bench, how he builds his line, how he builds an opportunity. And Cole Perfetti, I think, is a fascinating guy, because I think that if he's given a little bit more responsibility on the line, gets paired with one really good player, and then a Mason Appleton or something like that makes it onto that line, maybe you can still have a scoring line, and you're not doing this thing where you throw all your eggs in line 1 basket or line 2 basket, and then game 3 is not winning you games offensively, and game 4 just isn't really seeing the ice anyway. We saw that blueprint over and over and over again. The new blueprint could lay out in a way for a guy like Cole Perfetti where he could be given enough responsibility to be impactful, and also take that responsibility and find a way at the NHL to kind of produce beyond what we saw him doing last year, in a really good situation to produce.
Like mid-season form you are in to start this new season of the
Sean brought it this morning.
Show.
Love it.
I've got nothing else to do, guys. I've been dying for this. As he sent me that note, and I've been like, my leg's been bouncing under the table ever since. I couldn't.
But
wait.
I texted you 3 weeks ago, though, Sean. That's the thing. Okay, only 20 more days to go.
It was one day. I let that note linger just because I wanted to see how bad you wanted me, Ezzy.
See if we would sweeten the offer. I hope you held out for us. It was a strong RFA negotiation. I hope. Sean, thank you, buddy.
Hey, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me on. Great to have you back, and looking forward to seeing you guys down at the rink.
Sean, I owe you an ice cream from Trappers.
Oh, do you? From Trappers? Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Bring it in. We'll sit down and have it together.
Thank you, Sean. We'll see you soon, buddy.
See you, boys.
There you go. Sean Reynolds, our guest on this Saturday morning edition of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. When we come back, much more Jets talk. And at the bottom of hour number 2, Kurt Keelback is going to join us to talk about his new book, 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself. We'll be right back. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you, but why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. I want to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors. They make this show a possibility. Our friends at Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Bernstein's Deli, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and Grid Park support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Normally, I do that at the end of the show. I'll probably do it again at the end of the show, but I like to keep people guessing. You think I'm going to zig, instead I zag. You think I'm going to zag, instead
Keep the sponsors happy, Drew.
Keep the sponsors happy. They keep the lights on. So absolutely, I agree wholeheartedly.
They
with
keep
that,
food on
especially
my kids' table. I like it.
Yeah. Did you respond? There was a comment in the chat, Ezzy. Somebody, one of your family members, was asking if you had packed your shoes for the bar mitzvah. I don't know if you saw that. It
would have been Naomi, Drew, because I'm pretty sure Ruben and Ariella don't know how to participate in a YouTube chat. So yes, I do have a bat mitzvah coming up after the show. It actually starts right now, so I'm going to go a little bit late.
You're going to go do this show from the synagogue. That's
and then I'm going to pound about 25 party sandwiches.
And we all look forward to the aftermath of that occurring. I can't imagine why that would be unfortunate for anybody involved.
Apparently, there's going to be cheesecake too.
Oh, you do like a good cheesecake. So, that's going to be a lot of dairy intake for you. So that's an exciting day for you there, Mr. Ginsburg. I look forward to that. As I mentioned, yes, Kurt Keelback going to join us at the bottom of the hour in about 25 minutes, talk about his book, which I flipped through yesterday, 2 minutes for talking to myself, available at all booksellers. Real interesting, sort of very snappy, very fun to read, things of that nature. Just sort of recapping his career in the NHL as a play-by-play broadcaster. And of course, that question is still coming up all the time. It's probably the question I get the most when I run into people is who's going to be the play-by-play broadcaster for the Winnipeg Jets. The answer is that's still a question mark. My understanding is that there will be an announcement to that effect when the Canadian national broadcasting schedule gets released. The NHL and its U.S. partners, ESPN and TNT, released the national broadcasting schedule last week. The Canadian one is still being worked on. I understand there's a couple of hiccups that are occurring that need to be sort of smoothed out or whatever. And then once that's announced, I would expect there's going to be an announcement as to who will be the Jets play-by-play broadcaster, filling the very large shoes of one Dennis Bayak. So that is why you probably haven't heard anything about that. I would expect that to be announced in conjunction with the actual national broadcast, because then once the national broadcasting schedule is released, that allows the regional broadcasting schedule to be released. So that's a not very detailed update as to where things stand on that front.
Drew, you collect TV guides?
Yes, I collect TV guides. That was funny, Ezzy. That's a good Seinfeld reference right there, my friend. Very well done.
Yeah, it's exciting. It'll be exciting, I should say, to find out who the play-by-play broadcaster will be for the Jets. I mean, we know big shoes to fill with our good friend Dennis, and I think there's some rumors out there. I think people have an idea of who it could be, but to kind of piggyback on what you said, Drew, we don't have any inside information. So I imagine, though, it's going to happen in the next couple of weeks with training camp starting. I don't think they're going to wait till early October. As you mentioned, it makes a lot of sense to do it in concert with the schedule being released.
That's right, with the TV schedule being released. So time will tell on that front, and of course, we'll have the latest on that on our website. Dave, what's that website?
Little site called LeoCurve.com.
There you go. I also want to make mention.
It's our 15-year anniversary, by the way, with the website. 1-5.
Yeah,
it's time we shut down this entire enterprise. I think that's what's clear. The 15th anniversary, the 10th anniversary is gold, or the 50th anniversary is diamond. The 15th anniversary, that's disbanding. That's what the 15th anniversary should just be entirely is just disbanding. I wanted to give kudos to Dave. If you haven't had the opportunity this summer, maybe you haven't necessarily been paying close attention. You've been out, enjoying the outside weather. Dave did a series of really tremendous interviews with different Winnipeg Jets and Manitoba Moose players that are all available one-on-one with Minuk. We need sort of, it's not a Minuk Moose Minute. It's a Minuk, interview segment. Check them all out. They're available on our YouTube page in case you missed out on any of them. Some real insightful profiles. Dave M sitting down with some players. What were your favorite memory of those interviews there, Dave M? Which one did you? So what stands out to you about the litany of interviews that you did?
Nothing really, other than the fact that the guys are all open and that's why I love covering AHL hockey in addition to covering NHL, because you develop more of a relationship with the players at the AHL level than you do at the NHL level. So I just find that these guys are always very open. They're very respectful. They're giving of their time. And, I spoke to Jeff Malott, Johnny Kovacevic, Dylan Sandberg, and Morgan Barron this summer. And it's just nice to have some Jets content when the dog days of summer are around. So I just try and create a little bit of something to give these guys a platform, give people some insight into these players that, because of the way the COVID hit in last year, it was a different sort of, it was still different last year, even though it opened up a little bit more than it was the year before. But, we haven't had that sort of relationship with players that we traditionally have access to. And so it's just an opportunity to sit down, have a conversation with these guys with one-on-one players are comfortable generally, right? They know who I am. They you're not just shoving a camera and a microphone in their face. So they're more at ease. They're more likely to be open, honest. And so I just find that kind of format just makes it a little bit easier. It's less pressure. It's not live. They don't feel like they have to say something. So I just feel like it's a good flow of dialogue with them. And like I said, it provides insight into some of who these players are, and some guys that, like Morgan Barron, who folks really didn't have a lot of time to talk to, or, reintroduce them to Dylan Sandberg, Johnny Kovacevic, and you hear their personalities. And like I said, it's funny because stuff that we talk about last summer comes up this summer. So Dylan Sandberg, actually, probably Dylan Sandberg was my best point of the conversation, because when we did our Moose recap the year before, he was going on a fishing trip to the Lake of the Woods, the Minnesota Lake of the Woods, with his dad, and his mom was in the chat, and she said, "How come I'm not invited?" So this year, I actually asked him if he'd gone on any fishing trips. I made some comment about his mom, and he goes, "You'll be happy to know my mom they had just gone like 2 or 3 days before we sat down and chatted." And he said, "You'd be happy to know my mom actually made the trip." So that was probably the funniest moment of the chats. But they're all fun to do and all good. Like I said, I appreciated them for making themselves available.
I'm looking forward to Dave's new fishing podcast called Catch and Release.
Oh man, I would love. Let me tell you, I'm going to call Fink right now and be like, "Daniel, I got an idea." It's cold, Jerry.
It's funny. I was just thinking back to we had Sean on, just 10 minutes ago or so. We wrapped up the interview, with Sean, and the one name I don't think we mentioned once during the interview might be almost the most important player for the Winnipeg Jets, the linchpin of the Jets' success, and that's Connor Hellebuyck. And you mentioned it off the start of the broadcast, Ezzy, that Connor Hellebuyck wasn't as good last year as he was in his Vezina Trophy winning season of 2 years ago. Now, the team in front of him, certainly was an abomination in their own zone last year, so you can understand why his numbers may have taken a dip. But, and then I want to tie it to Rick Bowness. I think the impact of Rick Bowness coming in as head coach, and let's assume for conversation's sake, he's able to get the Jets playing that better defensive style. I think that's going to do wonders for Connor Hellebuyck and his success, because if the Jets can tighten things up and not let there be sort of an open for business sign in the high danger area, well, they still have one of the preeminent goaltenders in this league. And I think Connor Hellebuyck himself is probably putting pressure on himself to have a bit of a bounce back season.
Exactly, and I think the three of us all think Hellebuyck is going to be better than he was last year. And especially towards the end of the year, we talked a lot about how, he probably shouldn't have been playing so much when the Jets were clearly out of the playoff picture. And that maybe would have meant that Eric Comrie would have, been a Jet instead of, becoming a free agent and signing with the Buffalo Sabres. Right. But yeah, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I'm not worried about Hellebuyck having a bounce back season. I think, it was documented. He had his first kid, I believe that was at the beginning of the season, if I'm not mistaken, right, Dave? And I'm not saying that, that's the reason, but that does have an impact. We know, Drew, that, it means you're getting a little bit less sleep, especially, in the first 3 or 4 months, right? But it just wasn't the standard that we expected from Hellebuyck. But you just mentioned it. The play in front of him is just as important. Like, I remember when we had Craig Button on, last year during the season, towards the end of the season, the second half of the season, and talking about, the defensive structure, which at times was just non-existent. Like oftentimes last year, guys, if the Jets, weren't in the game, it was basically just a shooting gallery on Connor Hellebuyck. So the Jets absolutely have to be better defensively. The question is, can they be with essentially the exact same lineup, especially on defense? Like, yeah, you've made, a few tweaks here and there, and, Cole Perfetti is going to play more this year, and, Morgan Barron is going to play in your bottom six. Sam Gagner is going to play in your bottom six, but that defense is literally exactly the same. So the improvements have to come from within. The coaches have to squeeze, the most they can out of the entire team, because as we know, it's not just the group of defensemen, that prevents the other team from scoring. It's everybody, starting at the top with, Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois and Blake Wheeler, right? So I think that is the big question mark. And, I don't think, Hellebuyck, guys, is going to play significantly less games this year. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he's exactly where he is this year. Like, I don't think, David Riddick is going to play 35 games. I have Riddick at, around 20 games. Maybe he plays Dave like, 24, 25, something like that. But it's still Hellebuyck's net. I mean, this isn't a 1A, 1B situation. But you're absolutely right, Drew. I mean, the Jets will go as far as Connor Hellebuyck takes them. And that's the one thing, the one advantage they have over most teams. I mean, they don't have that advantage, necessarily over a team like Dallas with, Jake Ottinger, or they don't have that advantage over the Rangers with Shesterkin or Vasilevsky in Tampa. But, Hellebuyck to me is still a top 5 goalie in the league. Like, it's not like all of a sudden Hellebuyck is, not even a top 10 goalie. He's still in the prime of his career. So absolutely his play throughout the season, not just the beginning of the season, not just the middle part of the season, but if he is playing anywhere close to the level he was when he won the Vezina or was a Vezina Trophy finalist, the Jets should be a playoff team. He's that good.
Well, I think it's almost a requirement that they get him back to that level, because this team, this Jets team isn't as talented as the team was on paper last season, or certainly isn't as talented as the team was a couple of years ago. They need Connor Hellebuyck at elite level, Dave, to be successful in my books.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, sorry, I was expecting a little bit more, but
no,
Drew,
sorry.
I appreciate it.
When you think I'm going to zig, I zag. When you think I'm going to zag, I zig.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Although generally when you do that, you tear your Achilles heel and you're done. But anyways, the point is, I've seen you zig and zag in North Dakota, and you went down like a sack of potatoes. So anyways, look, this team will live and die by Connor Hellebuyck, and as he's 100% right. I mean, he had some life-changing events last year that obviously will impact you. The team was a tire fire defensively in front of him. That impacts things. I mean, the truth is he's been good when the team was still a tire fire defensively in front of him, but that's generally a superhuman level of success he requires. And I think what you're going to see from this Winnipeg Jets club, Drew, it's your favorite thing, attention to detail.
Oh, Dave, you know how to get me so excited.
First game 1, season 15 or whatever this is. I know what gets you going.
Kentucky basketball and attention to detail. That's what Drew loves.
Not just Kentucky basketball, Kentucky football. Huge game tonight against Florida.
See, I teed you up there, Drew.
You did. I mean, this is a big day for me. Banjo Bowl. Then we got to get home. We'll be home hopefully in time for the second half of Kentucky, Florida. Huge SEC East battle. Things are going to be happening today.
Are you having your meatloaf, Drew? Are you going to be eating your famous meatloaf?
No, I don't think there's going to be any meatloaf.
Lasagna. No, lasagna
along those lines.
Okay. Well, anyways, the point is that Connor Hellebuyck is going to have to just do what we've come to expect of him from the last few years, which is be that Vezina goaltender. But I really do suspect that with a new system, I mean, how many years have we spent talking about the Jets not playing a system and not having a defensive structure? So I suspect that once, Rick Bowness has an opportunity. I mean, remember, guys, they've cleaned house. This is a whole new coaching staff. And once they've had an opportunity to really put their stamp on this team, it's hard to already make predictions, right? So many people make predictions based on what the team was, but you have a completely different look on this club. So for me, the coaching staff and what they're able to do and how they're able to get this team playing like a team. I mean, think about what you said to Sean, or Sean said to you. Lots of good individual performances. Well, hockey isn't basketball where one player is going to be able to put him on. Like Connor McDavid is the best player in the world, right? Mm-hmm. He can't just put the Edmonton Oilers on his back. He does it sometimes and be sufficient to get them to Stanley Cup. You need to play like a team, as cliche as that is. And so Rick Bowness is going to have these guys playing well individually, but collectively as a group, playing in a different way than what we've seen for the last few years. Because quite frankly, this Jets team won Western Conference Finals appearance. That's great. But since then, not. So in great individual seasons, Kyle Connor almost scoring 50 goals. I mean, that was phenomenal to watch last year. But you need more. You need a better team buy-in, a collective effort, a group mentality, whatever you want to call it. And I think if you get that defensively, the offense is going to come because guys like Mark Scheifele, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Kyle Connor, Cole Perfetti, Blake Wheeler, they score. They're going to score goals. But I think if you play that proper way and you have that attention to detail, defensively, I think that they can actually play fine, and you can have Connor Hellebuyck be who Connor Hellebuyck is. So my expectation, again, would be a lot of weight is going to be on this training camp and the stamp that Rick Bowness and his coaching staff put on this Jets group.
You talk about goal scoring, and everyone just sort of, I think, assumes that it's going to come easy for the Winnipeg Jets. There were plenty of games last year, and there were plenty of times last year where goal scoring was not necessarily a strong suit for this team and didn't come as easily as you might think. They weren't an offensive juggernaut. We know that they weren't a defensive juggernaut by any stretch of the imagination, but they couldn't even outscore their defensive problems a lot. And I think that might be getting overlooked just a little bit when you think back. If you look at you think back to, there was certainly large chunks, and it probably happens to every team at various points in time, but there were large chunks of the season last year where the Jets really couldn't score offensively very, very often, guys.
Yeah, well, this year, though, luckily they're going to get to play Arizona and Chicago many times, and they're going to be able to put in some big-time goal numbers against those teams. But when you're talking about Stastny and Kopp, you're talking about a combined 100 points or around there, right? If you take Kopp's numbers with the Rangers and the Jets, right? So you have to replace that in the aggregate, to use a Moneyball term that I know that you guys like, right? Like, you're going to have to get that from Cole Perfetti, Jansen Harkins, Morgan Barron, David Gustafson, who, Dave has been talking about for several years, right? Like, they just don't have, this isn't, back in the day when, the Jets had Laine scoring, 46 goals. Like, Connor, yes, is a 50 goal scorer now, but they used to have Connor and Laine. And Dubois is a good offensive player, but all due respect, he's not going to have the same goal totals as Patrick Laine, or at least the ceiling of Laine. So yeah, there's no arguing about it, Drew. The Jets are going to have to win low-scoring games this year. They're not really going to have an option. They're not a top five. Like, they're not the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're not like that, or the Tampa Bay Lightning maybe from a couple years back. The Jets are still, I think, top 15 offensive team, but I wouldn't put them in,
middle of the pack.
Exactly. So I'm just saying they're not like, bottom 5 or anything like that.
No.
So it's going to help that, they're going to get to gang up on the couple of the worst teams in the division. But when you play better defensive teams like Colorado and, you run into, Dallas and Jake Ottinger, who's, arguably turned himself into a top 10 goalie in the NHL, that's when you have to win those 3-2 games as opposed to the 6-4 games that I think some of the Jets players prefer to play in. So, yeah, I mean, it isn't a guarantee, that the Jets are going to, score 5 or 6 goals every single night. But even though it's something we've talked about for so many years, I mean, really, especially this year, the Jets have to be better defensively. And that starts, with the veteran forwards like Scheifele and Wheeler. It's not just, you can't just lay it all on Connor Hellebuck in the defense.
Agreed. Let's head to break. When we come back, Kurt Keelback going to join us on the show, talk about his new book, 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself. Nobody go anywhere. Saturday morning, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
"I sure do."
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Dave Minuk's in the top right. Ezra Ginsburg's in the bottom right. We're pleased to be joined in the bottom left by former Winnipeg Jets and Phoenix Coyotes broadcaster Kurt Keelback, author of a brand new book, 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself. Kurt, congratulations on the book. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Well, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. You know, I was sitting outside last night, but sitting by a fire, enjoying sort of the chill in the fall air, and I was reading through the book, and throughout as I was reading it, I sort of had a smile on my face because almost I could vividly feel the stories you were telling in the book. So, what was it like for you to write this book? You have so many great hockey memories from the sort of the good old days, because so many of the stories you tell just don't happen in the NHL in 2022, and just the circumstances just don't happen. So from your perspective in writing the book, what was it like? Was it a sort of cathartic, to get these stories on paper and all this information and experiences that you went through back in the day?
Well, it was just something that kind of happened. And, you think back and you've got a lot of stories. And there was a time when I did a short-lived show where I had to write a series of editorials. And I think there were 13 shows. I wrote 13 editorials and I kept them. And then a couple of years passed by and I came across them again. I thought, I should write some more stories. Then along came COVID and I decided to write some more stories. And once I'd written about 100 of them, I thought, I might be able to write a book here, because people had asked me before if I might consider writing a book. And I wouldn't know how to do that, because I was thinking in terms of a novel where it would be continuous. But then the idea of doing a series of short stories where you can open the book on any page and they're all self-contained, I thought would be a better idea and much easier to write. And of course, each story then has a precedence of its own. So I totally enjoyed writing it. Actually, I was surprised how much joy I took in it. And there were some days when I would maybe write 2 or 3 stories, and sometimes I'd go 2 or 3 months and I wouldn't even think about it. So it was just kind of a hobby more than anything, but it was fun.
Well, it was definitely enjoyable to read. I like Drew. I have read it as well, and there are so many different stories and anecdotes that we can ask you about. The one thing, and I know Huss and on Winnipeg Sports Talk, they talked about this. I believe if it was 1992, I would have been 10 years old. But when you wrote about Peanut Butter Night, as I was reading about that, and I knew you were coming on, I'm like, we got to ask Kurt about Peanut Butter Night. For those that aren't aware, it was the Jets and Senators, November 5th, 1992. I wrote it down here. The giveaway was every fan in attendance, as they were walking into the Winnipeg Arena, got a jar of peanut butter. The Jets blew a 2-goal lead, and you talk about this in the book. The Jets blew a late 2-goal lead, and the Senators ended up winning the game in overtime. And for those who aren't aware, and I think you could probably guess what's going to happen next, the jars of peanut butter started to come on the ice. So we wanted to ask you, Kurt, what stands out to you about that game? Because it's that night is kind of taken on a life of its own. I think you'd agree.
It was just one of those games in November where, if you think a team's got to make the playoffs, you've got to beat the Ottawa Senators. They were a pretty bad team. In fact, I think, and I may be wrong on this, I think maybe Rick Bowness was coaching them at that time because he was their first coach. But it was just a wild scene. It wasn't even a very good game. The goaltending at both ends was bad. The score was 6-4, I believe it was. And then all of a sudden, those 2 late goals by the Senators, and you could just kind of feel the crowd saying, this isn't really happening. This can't happen. And of course, everyone is armed with a jar of peanut butter. So what possibly could go wrong when Ottawa scores the winning goal in overtime? And it was funny, really. I suppose there was some threat to it, but I can remember watching the referee and the linesman head to cover, watching the goalies pull their nets over themselves. And everywhere you looked, there were jars of peanut butter. And of course, the ice, as I wrote in the book, looked like the rodeo had been through. It wasn't exactly a pleasant sight, curdled brown peanut butter and broken plastic, I guess. I don't really think it was jars, but it was hilarious in retrospect. The Jets were embarrassed by it. I know they were. They had to do something the next day. So a plan they had anyway was to take the C away from Dean Kennedy and give it to Keith Tkachuk. No better time than the present. Let's try to change the focus of what happened here last night. So that's what they did.
Kurt, your voice is so iconic, and I think for those of us who grew up in the the 80s, 90s, like that was your voice was the voice of the Jets. And do you have any one call? Like for me, when I hear your name, I just think of Great Save Essenza. That just like reverberates through my brain. But is there anything that you just get asked a lot of? Like, do people walk up to you, or did they walk up to you at some point to say, "I want to hear you say this"? Was there anything like that jumped out to you in your career?
It's funny you should say that because most often it is Great Save Essenza. But yesterday, I was at a golf tournament and somebody asked me to do Great Save Tabarachi. So I did that one. But yeah, it's that one and a little bit.
Was it Rick Tabarachi who asked you to do that?
Pardon me? No, it wasn't
Rick Tabarachi.
No, although he was a pretty good golfer, I understand.
Kurt, you're synonymous now with Winnipeg, but you're not a Manitoban by birth. You're a Saskatchewan kid, and you talk about in the book about Fryer Nicholson, bringing you into the fold here in Winnipeg. what can your relationship with him? He was again another famous voice of a Winnipeg Jets era. Your relationship and the impact that he and maybe Cactus Jack Wells had on your career, really sort of to get you your start in Winnipeg after spending so many years in Yorkton and Melville doing play-by-play there.
Well, Fryer was a unique person. There's no question about it. You always knew where you stood. And sometimes your standing could change very suddenly. You'd be like an okay guy, and suddenly you're the biggest pain in the butt I ever met. and that's what he would say to me. But you always knew that underneath it all was a kind-hearted man, but a gruff exterior. But he also taught me a lot of things. I was a little green when it came to professional hockey. Hadn't been involved with it before, just done junior and senior. And, of course, the regular things that young sportscasters go through. So he told me where to go and where not to go and this sort of thing and introduced me to a lot of people. So it was a great learning curve working with Fryer. And of course, later on, I got to work with other people too who had a long and storied history, including Don Whitman. So I learned a little bit from each and every one of them, and I think it helped me in the long run.
Kurt Keelback, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, author of a brand new book, 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself, available at booksellers everywhere. It's a great read, so we do highly recommend it as Kurt is talking to us, going through his memories as former Winnipeg Jets and, of course, a Phoenix Coyotes broadcaster as well.
And there's so many different stories, as we mentioned earlier, that we can ask you about. I love the part where you talk about Laurie Boschman teaching your son Luke how to properly take, or at least take faceoffs the way that he likes to take faceoffs, and then him getting chastised for that way that he takes faceoffs. That was a great anecdote. I have to ask you. I mean, we're all similar age, and we all remember that magical season 92-93. Teemu scoring the 76 goals as a rookie. You mentioned in the book, and I thought, this really stood out to me, in your 2,400 NHL games that you called between, the Jets and the Coyotes, you didn't just pick Selanne breaking Mike Bossy's record. You specifically mentioned that it was Selanne's 7 goals that he scored in the 2 home games because he needed the 7 goals before they went on the road trip. And then that's how he scored the 54 goals. Everybody remembers the shooting up the glove and everything like that. But can you take us back just to that night, and not only him breaking the record, but how he did it with scoring those 7 goals in the 2 home games?
Well, it was just incredible, and as I explained in the book, it was one of those situations where you knew he was going to get that elusive goal 54. It was out there somewhere, and that he was going to beat Mike Bossy. But when they came home, and he was at 47 goals with a 2-game homestand, and then having to follow that with a 5-game road trip. With the way he was scoring, it wasn't going to take 7 games to get those goals. So everybody, including Teemu Selanne, wanted to see it happen in Winnipeg, and it did in an incredible fashion, scoring 4 goals in the first of the 2 games. And in fact, in that game, it was against Minnesota, as I recall. And late in the game, Minnesota pulled their goaltender. John Paddock did not put Teemu on the ice because he said Teemu didn't play very well that night, which kind of surprised a lot of people. And there weren't that many people at that game that night, at 11,000. But then 2 nights later, 14,000 people. And I do recall going through and talking to people prior to the game. Every single person I talked to knew that Teemu was going to score 3 more goals that night and break the record. And of course, it took only 15 seconds. He got started, and then he scored again. And then the goal that nobody can forget when Ty Domi flipped the puck out of the zone, and Teemu had the race for it with goaltender Stefan Fiset. It should have been done in slow motion. It was an iconic scene that just kind of stands out. He got there, he flipped it over, and of course, the goal, the celebration, and everybody went absolutely crazy. But that was the crowning achievement of anything I saw in those years, because 7 goals in 2 games when you needed 7 goals in 2 games and you're a rookie, that just doesn't happen.
Well, Kurt, I don't know what you're talking about, though. According to every Manitoban, everybody was in that building that night. Every single person was there for Teemu's magic night. I mean, it's amazing when you hear that story. They're like, oh, yeah, I was there. I'm like, boy, that arena must have held about 45,000 people for the amount of people that actually said that they were there.
Yeah, it was a tremendous moment, and just something that'll stand out forever in the history of the Winnipeg Jets.
Well, and speaking of the history of the Winnipeg Jets, because of course everybody here remembers when the Jets were getting ready to leave. What was it like for you that final season, knowing, of course, the team was going to Arizona the following year?
Well, I was like everybody else, extremely disappointed. I think inside you always believed that somehow there would be a miracle savior, some billionaire would fly in and say, "Hey, I want the team located here." And of course, there were all kinds of meetings and things, particularly at Thomas Steen's home after that final game, where they called all the very rich people, not only in Winnipeg, but also in the rest of Manitoba, and people who had moved to other parts, Burton Cummings, whoever, anybody who was had any Winnipeg roots was summoned on that night. And I remember being convinced, because I was fortunate enough to be at that gathering, that it was going to happen, that the Jets were going to be saved, and it was going to be just another great iconic story that this was going to happen. And then it didn't, and it was crushing. And I remember being at the corner of Portage and Main when we all expected an announcement at 2:00 that afternoon that there'd been a last gasp save, but that wasn't the case, and you could just feel everything deteriorate as the minutes went on. By about 10 after 2, 15 after 2, people were filing out, and you knew the end was at hand. And of course, for me, it was a double whammy, because not only was I, a fan of Winnipeg and the hockey scene here, but it was also my employment. So I didn't quite know what the heck was going to happen at that point. So it was a confusing time and a depressing time.
You talk about your employment, Kurt, and of course you did end up going to Phoenix, to be the play-by-play voice of the Coyotes for a while, and then that abruptly ended, as you talk about in your book, and you say it was sort of a cathartic for you to get your story out there, because that was your last job in the NHL. Do you feel as though that you were that powers that be punished you? And that's why your broadcasting career in the NHL ended the way it did so abruptly?
Well, somebody punished me, and but I'm not sure exactly why or for what reason. But it was just one of those things that happened, and it was hard to take. In fact, it still bothers me a little bit, because I figure I lost about 15 or 20 years of what was a very enjoyable and good career. But I'm to the point now where I realize it would have been over by this point anyway. And so it was a good thing to be able to write the book. I think it kind of got a lot of stuff off my back. And as I mentioned, most of the stories in the book were positive and tried to provide some humor in there. But I had to get that one story out there. I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I hadn't. So that's why I went in there. But it's not the focus of the book by any means. And it's something that I just did it for my own purposes more than anything else, just to get it out there and maybe to rub it into the two guys responsible.
I like it.
A whole lot to rub it into the two guys responsible.
Revenge is a dish best served cold, as they say. The book is called 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself. Kurt Keelback is the author. Kurt, John Ferguson is the subject of many of the stories in your book. And I grew up on the same street that Fergie lived on. So, I remember always driving past his house, and that's where the general manager of the Jets lives. And, there's the cliche, they don't make him that way anymore. And I think Fergie was sort of a one of a kind character. Just, I know there's probably too many, and there's so many stories in the book, and I don't want you to give them all away, but just your interactions with John Ferguson, how do you remember them all these years later?
Well, John's intensity was incredible. And if you saw him when things were going well for the Jets, he was so open, so just a fun person to be around. And everybody appreciated it. But you couldn't help but like the guy, because his heart and soul was poured into every moment of every game. And, he would get totally wrapped up into an exhibition game as much as anything else, because everything was important. And, of course, there was the story of what happened when he chased Rocket Richard out of the Winnipeg Arena. And, that was in the first year of the Jets, when people actually booed John Ferguson because they were disappointed in what he'd done. But once you spent any time with the man, you realized he couldn't help it. It was just him. Every single thing in life or in sports, where it came to the Winnipeg Jets or the Montreal Canadiens, it was him. He lived for it. He died with it. And in particular, if I remember one night, this wasn't in the book. One night, the Jets were in Montreal, and of course, to Fergie, winning in Montreal was the most important thing in the world. And he would sacrifice anything to have his Jets win a game at the Montreal Forum. Well, one night in Montreal, the Jets fell behind, I think, by 3 goals in the first period. Fergie couldn't stand it. He walked back to the hotel. It happened to be a Saturday night. He got back into the hotel. He sat in his room, and then he decided to turn on the TV to see what the final score was, and found out the Jets had won. And I have never seen a man so happy as John Ferguson when we came into that hotel after the game. And he took the whole bunch of us out for a night on the town, and he was just ecstatic all night. So he lived and died with every game. He was a very, very generous man, a good man to be around when things were good, but it was a little scary sometimes if things weren't so good.
That's why they say never turn off the game, right? Because you're gonna miss a huge part of it when you go to get that snack from the fridge, or you go to whatever, you leave the room for a bit. I wanted to ask you about the part of the book that you talked about the current state of broadcasting. I found that really interesting. Like you mentioned, the use of grandmother language, and you talk about homerism, and the other thing was some broadcasters you feel use statistics so much, and I agree with all 3 of those. And we talk about that often. Like sometimes you're just inundated with, this guy has 3 goals in 3 games, but he's 14th in the league in the power play and everything like that. And it ends up kind of distracting, from the game. What I wanted to ask you was, who are some of the broadcasters right now? Like a few of your favorite broadcasters, and why are they broadcasters? Is it because they're just really good at telling the story of the game? I just thought it would be interesting to get your perspective on maybe specific individual play-by-play broadcasters that you like, and what you think makes them so good.
Well, I hate to single out individuals. I'm certainly not gonna run down any fellow broadcaster, but I've seen, as I mentioned in the book, I thought Danny Gallivan, and I know he's way before your time, was great. I thought my dad was great, and I can remember too. And I'm trying to think of the man's name in St. Louis, who was an outstanding broadcaster. And there have been a lot of guys that are pretty good. But then it did become apparent to me that once the Americans got involved in broadcasting hockey, they didn't know what they were doing, because they were so inclined to talk during a game. And hockey demands constant attention. You just can't be talking about the picnic you went to the other game when a goal is being scored. You can do that when you're broadcasting a baseball game and the pitcher's looking off, or the team's in a huddle in a football game. But hockey is totally different. And I think, as I stated in there, it took the Americans a long time to realize that broadcasting hockey is a totally different thing because of the speed of the sport, and the fact that you mentioned before, we talked about the Fergie story where it was 3-0. He left the building, got there, and found out that his team had won the game. These things happen, and they happen very, very suddenly. 7 goals in 2 games by a rookie when he needed them, very, very suddenly. So you got to be on top of things all the time. And the statistical thing, I can't understand that at all. I find nothing more boring than a whole lot of statistics, and I know a lot of broadcasters do get into it, and maybe some people like it. But sometimes I've heard broadcasters say, and he scores. It's the winning goal. It makes it 4-3 with 2 minutes to go. He scores. That's his 4th goal in 7 games. That's not the significant moment of that goal. The significant moment is that it probably won the hockey game. And that's just differences. And I mean, obviously people are going to think differently from me. I know in the 5th chapter that I'm going to get some people with feedback of the negative variety. And I'm totally aware of that. And I can appreciate it, because some people won't agree with a lot of what I said.
Kurt, one of the things that you talk about is, and this idea of the changing of the way we interact is media with players. And I just think it's interesting because, I was watching like the 2 sports guys who many folks will remember from back in the day had a classic show. And I was just watching, I'm not joking, I was watching an episode literally like yesterday or the day before, where they had Dean Kennedy in like cowboy boots get into a hot tub, and they did an interview with Dean Kennedy in a hot tub. I can't even imagine something like that transpiring in today's NHL. So when did you start to notice that transition from the ability to tell a story and have a relationship to this almost standoffish, like aloofness with the media that is present right now?
I think it had a lot to do with money. I think it became more businesslike. And also, you got to remember that a lot of the players who came in those days were from Europe and weren't all that comfortable with the English language, and maybe didn't know how far they could go. They may have been from well, maybe from Russia or Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic or someplace where maybe they weren't as free to speak. And I think this carried over. But money had a lot to do with it, because suddenly it's like nobody wants to say anything that's going to turn somebody off, because the next contract might be bigger than the other. And the agents have a lot to do with it. And I think they tell players, look, watch what you say, be careful this way. And it's not, I don't think it's quite the easy, relaxed relationship. And I've been away from it for a while, so maybe things have reverted more to the way they were. But I know in my case in particular, it was interesting because when I worked with the Jets, I got to know the players from an arm's length, obviously, because I spoke with them every day. I interviewed 2 or 3 of the players every day. And over the course of the years, you get to know them and you get to make small talk now and then. When I got to Phoenix, it was a little bit different, because there they had a guy who was doing all the interviews, and that was just the way it was. It was a totally different feel. The first game I did, in fact, for the Phoenix Coyotes was an exhibition game in Calgary. So I thought, well, I'll start this thing off. Well, I'll go into the Calgary Flames dressing room. I did. I interviewed Joe Nieuwendyk, and I interviewed Theo Fleury, and I think Gary Roberts. And I got back, and I sent all these interviews back to Phoenix, and they said, what are these for? And I said, well, for the intermissions, pregame show, or whenever you want to use them, clips, cuts, the whole thing, doesn't matter. No, we want you to talk to Coyotes. So that was it. And so you kind of lost touch. Because of that, I didn't spend much time in the visiting dressing room. And because Todd Walsh did all the interviews in Phoenix, I didn't even spend that much time in the Coyote dressing room. And as a result, you get a little farther away. So I kind of liked the relationship that I had established with a lot of the people in the early days of the Winnipeg Jets. And of course, they had an awful lot of really good people who played with that team too. And I'm sure there are just as many quality people now. It's just that maybe they keep themselves a little farther away.
Last question for you, Kurt. Tremendous broadcasting career. Is there one call in particular that stands out to you the most, that you can sort of vividly remember? I mean, you were on the call for the amazing Alex Ovechkin goal in Phoenix, the one that's, it didn't seem like it should be physically possible for him to score that goal. But from your perspective, when you think through your career, was there one call in particular that you remember the most, or is more significant to you maybe than all the others?
There were 2. Both happened in Winnipeg. One we already spoke of, that 54th goal by Timo Solani. And the other was the time Dave Ellett scored the double overtime goal. That building was just crazy. And it just seemed like finally the monkey was off the back, that finally the Jets were going to be able to crack through, that they won a significant game and they were going to move on and knock off the Edmonton Oilers. And who knew how far they were going to get that year. So that one, I think, more than any, stands out as just a great moment in Jets history. And I have never heard my call of it. I don't know what I said, but I guarantee it was pretty exciting. I was pretty excited. And it was just a great atmosphere. It happened in a whiteout. Things don't get better than that. It was a lot of fun. And that's another thing, talked about. It's being at the rink and being watching a game on television. It's not the same thing, but it was certainly great to have been there for those 2 occasions. And particularly to be considered a job at the time, because it was a great way to make a living.
The book is called 2 Minutes for Talking to Myself. It's available through the Friesen Press website. It's also available on Amazon. You can buy it in ebook, paperback, or hardcover. Kurt Keelback, thanks so much for joining us this morning. A great book, a great read, highly recommended, and a great catching up with you again.
It was great talking to you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kurt.
Cheers, Kurt. Thanks so much.
There he goes, Kurt Keelback, the Winnipeg Jets 1.0 broadcaster. Spent the time, of course, in Phoenix with the Coyotes as well. That was a lot of fun, because I mean,
the fact that I got him to say great save essence, like my work here was done. I didn't even need to ask another question.
Take the rest of the show off, Dave.
As soon as I heard great save, I actually said in advance of having Kurt on, I was like, I just need to hear him say great save essence. He did it. I was like, I'm done. Shut up. Turn off the lights.
I got to mention this. I turned 40 recently. Drew turned 80 recently. We're getting a little bit older here, but nothing changes. I was telling Naomi this morning, we were having breakfast,
including that joke. By the way, nothing changes. That
exactly.
Joke you've been using that joke since I turned 30.
No, but whether you're 45, 55, 65, we all remember listening to Kurt call the games back. I remember, I would take the radio and back in the early 90s, all games weren't televised, right? Like I forget exactly how many games weren't televised, right? So like you would listen, you would like, little Ezra would have his, little bubble bath at night, and then he would, get the radio and listen to his, Jets game in his pajamas, right? Like we all did that. So I mean, when I was really excited this morning, I told Naomi because it's Kurt Keelback, like he was like, they say the soundtrack of your life, right? Like he kind of was, the Jets soundtrack for our lives, like everybody, whether you were, 10 years old back then or 40 years old, right? So he's such a good guy, and it was a really great pleasure to have him on, and great to read his book. One thing we didn't get into talking about that 1990 season, and I don't want to give away the whole book because we encourage everybody, to purchase it.
People want it in audible format. Everybody wants to hear Kurt Keelback.
Exactly. Well, no, he gets into Stefan Beauregard getting the start in Game 7 over Bob Essenza, even though clearly Essenza was the Jets' better goalie. And it just takes you. It instantly. It's like a time capsule. Right, like reading him talk about it takes you back. That was over 30 years ago, 32 years ago, right? So, just incredible to have him on. And I encourage anybody, especially if you're a Jets 1.0 enthusiast, go check it out. Or Jets 2.0, you can go check it out. It's just got so many great stories, and as Kurt mentioned, it's like short story form. It's not long chapters, so it's a good read. You can put it down, pick it up, read it during breakfast, read it during lunch, whatever. But it's a lot of fun to read.
I'll say this, the Winnipeg Jets, 1.0 and 2.0 historically have had some not so great hockey teams, but we've been blessed by having some great broadcasters. So, Kurt, obviously back in the day, and then of course, Dennis and
Drew Mindell.
Drew Mindell, of course, Paulie on the radio broadcast now. So we've had a lot of great broadcasters who've been calling some at times mediocre hockey. So at least you can look at that as a positive, as a bit of a silver lining to some lousy hockey games.
But even that story he just shared about the last, I never knew that. Like the story about everybody gathering in Thomas Steen's house making phone calls, like. It's like things like that, the details that you hear that stuff. And again, we were all around giving our allowance to hopefully save the Jets. And at the same time, like you hear that, and it's, again, those are little anecdotal stories that I was never aware of. And I just think like, that's why his book is great. And as he's right and Drew's right, we were flipping through it and reading it. And it was just, it is like a blast from the past.
I might have told you guys this story when I was 14. I was 14, I believe 13 or 14. And when the Jets, it was announced they were officially leaving. And I was so mad. I used to have like my room, I would have, Jets pictures and posters and like all of us.
Yeah.
And I remember I was so mad that I had a bunch. I used to save some of the newspapers from, Jets games, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I decided to burn the newspapers. And my dad, I guess, smelled it or whatever. And he saw me do it. And he thought I was smoking cigarettes at 14 years old. Room. And I said, no, it was outside.
I was going to say, you started the fire in the house? That would be
no, it was in the garage outside. And my dad comes out and goes, "What are you doing? Are you smoking?" I said, "No, Dad, I'm burning the Jets newspapers." That's how mad I was. I guess that was my way of showing my frustration and anger. But I think, people did worse things than that. But there was just a lot of negative emotion.
I'm pretty sure I actually refused to see a hockey game until 1998 when I was in Anaheim. And I went to see the Ducks and Flames. And I remember watching Sandy McCarthy skate, and even though he's still probably a phenomenal skater, and I thought to myself, is this really what the NHL has become? I'm never watching this again. And I don't think I went to a game till I don't think I saw another game till like
Cale Hulse on that team.
Yeah, honestly, I don't remember. It was honestly, it was the word. The Palace. What's it called in the pond? The pond. Yeah, the pond
was Roman Turek the goalie.
I remember. It's terrible. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm out. I can't watch this crap anymore.
Well, guess what? You're back in. Just when you think you're out, they pull you back in.
They did. The Red shows. It was the Red Wings first, but now it's the Jets.
The post-game shows aren't too far away, folks. They're just over a month away. When's that first game? October 14th?
What do you mean? Are we counting down the days?
Aren't we doing post games for the preseason?
We are not, but October 14th, the first post-game show will be back after the Jets and the Rangers. We'll be back next Saturday, of course. We're not going anywhere just yet, so you've got a couple minutes to still stick with us. Next Saturday, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, every Saturday morning, 9 a.m. We'll get you set for the upcoming training camp, which is, of course, right around the corner, so you be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the podcast, follow us wherever our content may be, like us, tell your friends, tell your family, of course, the best best place to be is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday mornings and after each and every Jets game. And what's happened in the offseason, we've been talking about this for a while. Crazy Dave's jersey making machine was left on all summer long. We have so much swag to give away that we've had to buy special software to figure out how to do these contests. That's how much stuff we have, courtesy of our friends at Betway. And it's not just, stuff. These are authentic Winnipeg Jets jerseys, like a true Winnipeg Jets jersey.
Away, Heritage Classic.
There you go. Everything under the sun. We have Dave had to buy a new house, folks, because he's got so much stuff that we have to give away on the shows. So be sure that you are tuned in to the post-game show. Be sure you're tuned into the Saturday show. Be sure you're downloading the podcast, following us on Twitter,
commenting
Instagram,
Facebook,
on the
video,
commenting, sharing, liking, loving, hugging, kissing, everything under the sun in order to get into the contest.
Hey, Drew, you went a little far with the kissing. I mean, I can take a random hug from a fan of Illegal Curve, but I don't know if I'm ready for a kiss just yet.
Well, you never.
I don't know if Naomi would like that.
Well, I mean, if it's it can be a platonic kiss. It doesn't have to be a romantic kiss.
Yeah,
it's perfectly
like a little kiss on the cheek, like they do in Europe.
That's right. Exactly. A little bit like that. Nothing wrong with that. As people express their affection for you, and they just want to. I think they really just want to feel the beard more than anything.
I prefer a hand sandwich, to be honest with you. A solid. Like, give me a solid.
Yeah.
I think what Drew is trying to say.
Yes.
Is that love is like a mother. I think the truth is that
that's your second old school reference of the show, Dave.
I know. So, anyways, we have a ton of stuff. It's gonna be such an amazing. Our friends at Seagrams have given us tons of stuff. Our friends at Tough Duck, we have toques. We've got so much stuff, and again, Betway has just filled us with like a ton of not just jerseys. We got hats, we got t-shirts. So we got a ton of Jet stuff to give away this season. It's gonna be amazing. And yeah, one of the biggest things you can do for us though, not just commenting in the chat, which I love, and you guys know I pay attention to that more than I do to Drew and Ezzy. But one of the things that you do help us with, and I try and respond to every comment, is by commenting on the videos, like those interviews I did with the players. Leave comments, that kind of thing. It helps with the YouTube. It gives us the algorithm. So likes, that's good. Commenting, good. And again, if you can, only if it's positive, but go on Apple and leave us a review. That also.
I still can't get rid of Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk out of my Instagram algorithm. Like I made the mistake of watching a couple of their videos, and now they've just been popping up for the last 2 years. So if anybody knows how to get rid of Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson, let me know.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, Ezzy, that was totally random, even for you. That was a random way, and I don't think we have to end the show on that.
I want to do one, pass along our condolences, even though this is the first show. We gotta give condolences to the family of Scott Campbell, the Jets 1.0 player who played WHA and NHL games, majority of his NHL career here in Winnipeg. So he passed away at the age of 65 last weekend. I spoke to his mother actually, who let me know that he had passed away. And I just want to express our condolences on behalf of the Legal Curve to his family for the loss of Scott. Scott, as folks know, was obviously a player in the first iteration of the Winnipeg Jets, but also became a free press reporter, and he interacted with folks on Twitter, and he always had time for anybody in the Jets community, people who wanted to ask him questions. He was a really nice guy. We would chat with him and that sort of thing. So our condolences to the family of Scott Campbell, because it's a tough loss for him and for his family. But his mom had a really great attitude, and I have to say, when I spoke to her subsequent to our initial conversation when she gave me the news, was she was so touched by all the people that had commented about her son and his impact on them. So she was really appreciative. So I wanted to convey that to everyone, and express my thanks that people did that and they took the time to share that, because it brought her a little bit of comfort.
Well said, Dave M. And yes, absolutely. We extend our condolences on the passing of Scott. Big thank you to all of you for joining us. It's our return show from hiatus. It's always fun to get back into the swing of things. We thank you all for joining us on this Saturday morning. We'll be back again next Saturday morning, 9 a.m. In the meantime, all your latest Winnipeg Jets news, anything big, anything breaking, your daily papers, it's all available on illegalcurve.com. Big thank you to all the sponsors of this show, of the website. They make this a possibility. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Betway, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and Grid Park support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. Are you pointing because you have something else to say, Dave?
Just to show that we're not just promoting these companies because they're giving us money. I'm actually using Rolly's to do a move for my family. So great to deal with. I had the opportunity to talk to those guys this week. So they really are. They're phenomenal to deal with. And Rolly is just one example of many of our sponsors that are really great guys to talk to. And they, like I said, they're handling a move for our family and hopefully they'll be able to.
Is there a piano involved though,
Yes.
Dave?
Can they get the piano off of Ezzy? That's the real question.
The Minuk family is not musically inclined, so we do not have we're not a big piano family, but trust me, piano man, if I could have a piano involved, as
I've seen Gary strum a few tunes on the guitar.
No.
That's it for us on this Saturday morning, folks. Enjoy the Banjo Bowl if you're going. Be safe if you're going. Maybe public transportation in case you're going to be tipping a few back in any event. Thank you so much for joining us. Dave Minuk is in the top right. Ezra Ginsburg's in the bottom middle. Big thanks to Sean Reynolds. Big thanks to Kurt Keelback. Smash the like button. Subscribe to the YouTube. Subscribe to the podcast. Rate us, review us, leave us some feedback. Until next Saturday at 9 a.m. I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Thanks for watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.